They sold me on a Thursday. Not at auction. Not in a market. They handed me over like a debt being paid, folded into an envelope, sealed, and pushed across a table to the most dangerous man alive. I didn't fight. That's the part that still haunts me. I stood in the great hall of Ashvale Pack, my hands tied at the wrist with silver cord, and I did not scream. I did not beg. I just looked at my alpha, the man who had raised me after my mother died, and I waited for him to meet my eyes. He never did. She is yours, he said, in full payment of the blood debt owed to the Black Throne. A pause, heavy as stone. Then a voice replied. Low, dark, the kind of voice that didn't need to be raised to make every wolf in a room go still. I didn't ask for a woman. No, my alpha said quickly. But she is valuable. She is. She is a slave. The word landed on my skin like a brand. Not a servant. Not a ward. Not a ward of the pack. A slave. I finally looked at him then. The Alpha King of the Black Throne. Kael Dravon. He was standing at the far end of the hall, dressed in black from collar to boot, arms folded across a chest that looked carved from granite. His eyes found mine before I found his. Like he'd been watching me the whole time. Gold. His eyes were gold, not amber, not hazel, pure, searing gold, the color of a fire at its hottest point, just before it consumes everything. He looked at me for exactly 3 seconds. Then he turned away. Bring her, he said to no one in particular. And just like that, my life as I knew it was over. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, standing in that hall with silver at my wrists and shame burning down my throat, was that Kael Dravon had already decided something the moment our eyes met. Something he would spend the next 3 months refusing to admit, even to himself. Something that would get 6 of his best warriors killed. Something that would crack the most feared ruler in the known packs straight down the center. And something that would change everything, for both of us, before the blood dried. This is that story. Chapter 1. The Black Throne pack didn't look the way I expected. I had imagined darkness. I had imagined cages, chains on walls, the smell of fear ground into every surface. What I found instead was a fortress. Stone towers that rose so high they disappeared into low cloud. A gate that required 4 men to open. Torchlight that burned gold and copper along every corridor, warm and relentless, like the place refused to be cold even when it should be. And wolves. Everywhere. Large, well-fed, well-armed, moving with the coordinated certainty of a pack that had never lost a war. They watched me walk through their gates. Every single one of them. Not with cruelty. Not even with contempt. With curiosity. Like I was something unusual. Like they weren't sure what category to put me in. I kept my chin level. I kept my eyes forward. I had promised myself one thing on the journey here. I would not let them see me break. The man who led me through the gates, a tall, red-haired warrior called Brennan, had been almost unbearably polite. No yanking of the cord. No rough handling. He walked at my pace and said nothing, which somehow made it worse. I wanted to be angry. Anger was easier than fear. He brought me to a chamber in the east wing. Not a cell. A room. Stone walls, yes, but hung with tapestries. A bed with actual blankets. A window, small, but real, looking out over a courtyard where snow was just beginning to fall. I stood in the center of the room and tried to understand it. This is where you'll stay, Brennan said. Where are the chains? I asked. He looked at me. Something moved behind his eyes. Something like discomfort. There are no chains. I was told I was a slave. You were told correctly. Then where are the chains? He was quiet for a long moment. The Alpha King has his own methods, he finally said. I'd recommend not asking him to clarify them. He left. The door didn't lock. I checked. Twice. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the unlocked door for a very long time, trying to decide if it made me feel safer or more afraid. I decided on more afraid. Locked doors I understood. A door left open by a man who clearly didn't think I'd run. That was something else entirely. That was a man who knew things about me I hadn't learned yet about myself. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the window and watched snow settle on stone, and I thought about the look on my alpha's face when he handed me over. Not guilt. Not grief. Relief. That was the thing that burned long after everything else went cold. He had been relieved. Why? I pressed my palm flat against the cold stone of the windowsill. Behind my ribs, something prickled. Hot and unsettled. Like the first warning tremor before an earthquake. like something in my body already knew something my mind was still refusing to look at. I pushed it down. I breathed. And in the courtyard below, half hidden in the shadow of the east tower, a figure stood in the snow. Still, watchful, gold eyes catching the torchlight. He was looking up at my window. I didn't move. Neither did he. For 3 full minutes, we held each other's gaze through glass and snowfall. And then he turned, disappeared into the dark, and left me sitting there with my heart hammering for reasons I absolutely refused to name. Chapter 2. He summoned me the next morning. Not with a request. Not with a knock. With a single sentence, delivered by Brennan at my door. The Alpha King will see you now. I followed him through the fortress. The hall I was brought to was enormous, long and high-ceilinged, with a fire burning at each end that radiated heat I could feel from 20 feet away. Kael Dravon sat at the center. Not on a throne. On a plain wooden chair, at a plain wooden table, surrounded by maps and reports and the wreckage of what looked like a 3-hour war strategy session. He didn't look up when I entered. He was reading something. Or pretending to. I stood 10 feet away and waited. The room had 6 other wolves in it. Warriors, by their build and bearing. All of them watching me with that same curious, measuring look I'd gotten at the gates. I kept my hands loose at my sides. I kept my breathing even. You didn't eat this morning, he said. Still not looking up. I blinked. How do you? I know everything that happens in this fortress. He turned a page. You sat by the window all night. You refused the food tray at dawn. You asked the guard outside your door if there was a way out through the east garden. I felt heat climb my neck. And, I said, that made him look up. Just his eyes, at first. Then his head tilted, barely an inch, and his full gaze settled on me with the weight of something much older and heavier than any man should carry. And nothing, he said. I'm telling you what I know, not punishing you for it. Yet, something flickered, quick as lightning, gone before I could name it. Yet, he agreed. Then, do you know why you're here? Blood debt, I said. My Alpha owed you something. He didn't have gold or land to give, so he gave you me. That's the short version. He set down the paper, folded his hands on the table. Sit down. I'd rather stand. Seraphine. The sound of my name in his voice was the single most unsettling thing that had ever happened to me. He said it like he'd said it before. In private. In a place I hadn't been. Like the word was already worn smooth from use. I sat down. He watched me settle into the chair across from him. And then he spoke slowly, like he was choosing each word the way you choose footing on a crumbling ledge. You are not a prisoner. You are not a guest. You are not a slave. I said. In danger. Not from me. Not from anyone in this pack, as long as you follow the rules. Which are? He held up one finger. You don't leave the fortress grounds without escort. A second finger. You don't speak to visiting dignitaries or outside wolves. Third finger. You report to me every evening. Here, at dusk. I stared at him. That's it. That's it. And if I break one? The gold eyes held mine. Don't. Not a threat. Not a warning. A fact. The way you tell someone not to step off a cliff. Because the fall is already decided. Not by him. By gravity. I felt that prickling sensation again, the one behind my ribs, sharper this time. I pressed it down harder. Why do you want me to report to you at dusk? Because I have questions. About what? About Ashvale Pack. About your Alpha. About the 6 years before your mother died and the 4 years after. I went very still. You know about my mother. I know about everyone who enters my fortress. He stood, picked up his papers. I also know that your Alpha didn't hand you over out of debt. The room seemed to shrink. What do you mean? He looked at me over the table. One long, measuring look. He was afraid of you. Then he walked out. Left me sitting there, cold, shaken, with my heart pulling against my ribs like something on a leash. And absolutely no idea what he meant. Or why the words landed not like a revelation but like a confirmation of something I'd been terrified to believe. Chapter 3. On the 3rd day, he marked me. Not the way I feared. Not teeth. Not blood. Not the sacred claiming bite that bonded a mate for life. He marked me with ink and silver. A sigil, pressed into the inside of my left wrist by a pack elder who smelled of cedar and old power. The old woman worked in silence. She didn't meet my eyes. I watched the lines form, angular, deliberate, precise, and felt the cool burn of the silver compound settle into my skin like a scar deciding to be permanent. It read, in the old tongue, "Property of the Black Throne." I didn't flinch. Kael stood at the edge of the room, watching, arms crossed, expression unreadable. When it was done, the elder bowed her head and left without a word. I held up my wrist, looked at the mark. "Property," I said. "It's protection," he said. "From what?" "From every wolf outside this pack who might decide you're unclaimed and therefore available." I looked at him. Available for what? He didn't answer. But something moved in his jaw, a tightening, a controlled press, that told me the answer was something he didn't want to say out loud. "This protects you in the field," he said. "When I take the pack to negotiations, to territory claims, to summits, you'll come with me. The mark identifies you as Black Throne property. Anyone who touches you answers to me. And if someone doesn't care about your mark..." The gold eyes went very, very still. "No one," he said quietly, "doesn't care about my mark." I believed him. That was the terrifying part. I believed every word of it, not because he threatened me, but because of the way he said it. Calm as a man describing weather. Certain as death. I pressed my thumb over the sigil on my wrist. It was still warm. "You said my alpha was afraid of me." He said nothing. "What did you mean?" He moved toward the door. "Dusk," he said. "My study. We'll talk then." "You keep delaying the answer." He paused. Hand on the frame. "Back to me." "Yes," he said. "Why?" A pause. Long enough that I started to think he wasn't going to answer. Then, "Because the answer changes things. And I'm not ready for things to change." He left. I stared at the empty doorway for a long time after. My wrist throbbed. The mark pulsed once, twice, like a second heartbeat. Property of the Black Throne. Strange thing, stranger than anything else about this, was that standing there, marked and claimed by the most feared alpha alive, I felt, for the first time in 4 years, completely and inexplicably, safe. And that terrified me more than anything. Chapter 4. It happened on the 9th day. I had learned the rhythms of the fortress by then. Breakfast in the east kitchen. Morning hours alone or with Brennan, who had taken it upon himself to be my unofficial keeper, not unkindly. Dusk meetings with Kael that had become something I was no longer dreading. Something I was, in fact. No, I wasn't going there. On the 9th day, a group of warriors arrived from the Western Reach. Allies, Brennan explained. Here for a treaty renewal. There were 8 of them. Loud, weathered, reeking of pine and river water. I was crossing the main courtyard when they came through the gate. One of them saw me. He was big, the way all dominant wolves are big, like the body knows it carries something larger than itself inside, with a scarred jaw and eyes that moved over me the way certain men's eyes do. Assessing. Deciding. "Whose is she?" he called out. "To no one in particular. To the air between us." Brennan stepped forward. "Black Throne," he said firmly. The warrior looked at my wrist. Looked at the mark. Then he smiled. The smile of someone who had decided the mark was an obstacle rather than a warning. "All due respect to the Black Throne," he said, "but the Alpha King isn't here right now, is he?" He took a step toward me. I held my ground. My heartbeat spiked, one sharp surge of adrenaline, but I held my ground, because I had learned something in 4 years under a cruel alpha. If you run, they always chase. The warrior reached out, grabbed my wrist, the marked one, and squeezed. The sigil burned. Not painful. More like activated. Like a flare being fired into the sky. I heard something behind me. I didn't hear footsteps. I didn't hear a door. I heard the air change. And then Kael was there. I don't know how to describe it other than to say, he appeared. Between one breath and the next, he was simply present, like the word wrath had taken a physical form and stepped into the courtyard. He said nothing. He looked at the warrior's hand on my wrist. The warrior, to his considerable credit, let go immediately. Stepped back. Raised both hands. "Alpha King, I didn't realize." "You saw the mark," Kael said. Not loud. Not angry. Very, very calm. The warrior's face changed. The pack standing around us had gone completely, terrifyingly silent. Yes, but..." "You saw my mark on her wrist." I wasn't going to." Kael moved. Fast, impossibly fast for a man that size. and his hand closed around the warrior's throat with the casual efficiency of someone who had done this so many times it no longer required full attention. You touched what bears my mark. Alpha King, I. That is the last time, Kael said, that you will ever make that mistake. He let go. The warrior dropped, just to his knees, not dead, not broken, but shaking, visibly, like a man who had looked down and seen exactly how close he'd come to the edge. Kael stepped back, turned to the Western Reach delegation's leader, a gray-bearded wolf who had gone the color of old ash. Remove him from my lands, Kael said. The treaty stands. He does not. A pause. And understand, every wolf under every banner who enters this territory, they are all told. Clearly. Tonight. He looked at me then. Just once. A fast, sweeping look, checking, I realized. Checking if I was hurt. I shook my head, barely a motion. Something in his face loosened by a fraction. So small I almost missed it. Then he walked away. Left me standing in the stunned silence of the courtyard, my wrist still warm where the mark had burned, my blood roaring in my ears. Not from fear. Not from relief. From something I had absolutely no name for. Something that felt like watching a storm and not wanting to go inside. Brennan appeared at my elbow. Are you all right? He asked quietly. I'm fine. That's the fastest I've ever seen him move, Brennan said, almost to himself. And I've known him for 11 years. I looked at the doorway where Kael had disappeared. What does that mean? I asked. Brennan was quiet for a moment. I'm not entirely sure, he said. But I think it means you should be very, very careful, Seraphine. Not of him. Then of what? He looked at me. Of how fast he moved. Of what that tells you about what you mean to him. And of whether you're prepared for what comes next if that feeling keeps growing. I opened my mouth to argue, to say I meant nothing. I was a slave, a debt, a piece of property. But the mark on my wrist pulsed again. Warm and insistent. Like it knew something I didn't. Like it was trying to answer a question I hadn't asked yet. Chapter 5. Our dusk meetings had changed. I couldn't point to the moment. I couldn't say, there, that's when it shifted. But somewhere between the second week and the third, the conversations had stopped being interrogations. He still asked about Ashvale. He still took notes. He still wore that carved, careful expression that gave away nothing deliberate. But other things slipped through. He laughed once, a short, surprised sound, when I described my Alpha's War Council and the way 3 of the senior wolves had all claimed the same idea and spent 40 minutes arguing over who'd thought of it first. He stopped hiding that he watched the door whenever I was later than usual. He started having food brought that I hadn't asked for but that happened, without fail, to be things I had mentioned liking. Honey bread. Roasted figures. Hot cider in a clay cup that held warmth longer than glass. I noticed. I said nothing. He never acknowledged it. On the evening of the 23rd day, I had started counting without realizing. He asked me about my wolf. You haven't shifted since you arrived. I was sitting in the chair across from him, my usual place, my knees pulled up to my chest because the fire had burned low and the room was cooling. No. Why? I was quiet. Seraphine. Because the last time I shifted was the night my Alpha decided to get rid of me. And I'd rather not remember that. A silence. He set down his pen. What happened? I looked at the fire. I shifted and I was bigger than I should have been. My wolf is not. She's not a normal size. She never has been. She's larger than the ranked females. Larger than most of the ranked males. I stopped. He waited. My Alpha saw her. Saw how large she was. And the next morning he started making calls. I said it flatly. No emotion. I'd had weeks to practice. But I felt him. Felt the change in the air, the drop in temperature that had nothing to do with the fire. He was afraid of your wolf. I looked at him. His face was doing something I hadn't seen before. A tightening around the eyes. A controlled, deliberate stillness that looked less like calm and more like someone very carefully not doing something they wanted to do. He sent you here, Kael said slowly, not as payment. Not as debt. He sent you here because he thought I would cage you. Because he thought the Black Throne would. He stopped. Would what? The gold eyes held mine. He thought I would break you. The fire popped. A log shifted. Sparks scattered and died. And will you? I asked. Very quiet. Sincere. Because after 23 days I had stopped performing bravery in front of him and had started just being honest. And honest me needed to know. He stood up. Moved around the table. stopped directly in front of me. Close enough that I could smell him, pine and iron and something underneath both, something ancient and warm, like sun-heated stone. "Look at me," he said. I looked up. The gold eyes. "So close. Has anyone in this fortress hurt you?" "No." "Has anyone threatened you?" "No." "Have I?" "No." He nodded once. Slow, like filing something away. "Then you have your answer." He stepped back, picked up his pen, but his jaw was still set. His hands weren't entirely steady. I watched them move across the page and thought about a man who moved in a fraction of a second to stop a stranger from touching my wrist. I thought about unlocked doors and honey bread and eyes that found my window in the snow. I thought about what Brennan said. "Be careful of what this tells you about what you mean to him." I pulled my sleeves over my hands, tucked my chin to my chest, and tried, very hard, not to mean anything to anyone, especially not to him. Chapter 6. Her name was Isolde. She arrived on the 31st day like she owned the air she walked through, tall, pale, silver-haired, wearing the insignia of the High Northern Pack at her collar. She was the most beautiful woman I had ever seen in a way that immediately made me want to look somewhere else. She was also, I learned within 2 hours of her arrival, the woman 3 neighboring alphas and the Black Throne's own elder council had agreed was the most suitable candidate for Kael's Luna. His queen. His mate. I learned this not from him. Obviously. I learned it from the kitchen maid, who told Brennan, who tried not to tell me and absolutely failed. "She's been proposed before," Brennan said carefully. "His never formally accepted. But she keeps coming back." "She keeps, yes, she does." I was standing at the window again. My window. The one that looked over the courtyard. Isolde was below, greeting Kael's senior wolves with the ease of someone who had practiced belonging here. She was laughing. Her hand rested briefly on the arm of the wolf beside her. I felt nothing. I told myself I felt nothing. I was very, very convincing. "He doesn't want a mate," I said. "He wants." Brennan stopped. "What he wants and what he's allowed to want are different things. He's the Alpha King, Seraphine. The pack needs an heir. The council is running out of patience. And Isolde is the solution. She has been, yes, for about 3 years." I looked at the mark on my wrist. Property of the Black Throne. Not mate. Not chosen. Property. "Good," I said. "That's good. He should choose her. Choose someone. Get the council off his back." Brennan said nothing. I turned from the window. Dusk was 2 hours away. I went to the kitchens. I ate honey bread and tasted nothing. That evening, I arrived at the study 3 minutes late for the first time. He was standing by the window when I entered. Not at the table. At the window. Looking out. The way I sometimes did. "You're late," he said. "I know." I sat down. Poured my own cider. Wrapped my hands around the cup. He didn't turn around. "She's proposing a formal ceremony," he said. "Isolde. Her pack has requested a bonding date be set before the new moon." "That's soon," I said. 3 weeks. "Will you do it?" The silence that followed was longer than it should have been. "The council wants me to." "That's not what I asked." He turned from the window. Looked at me. Really looked. The kind of looking that peeled back layers, that went past skin and expression and into something underneath. "No," he said finally. "I won't." "Why not?" The gold eyes stayed on mine. "Because I don't." He stopped. Something shifted in his face. A tightening. A decision being unmade. "Because the timing is wrong," he said. "Sit down. We have work to do." He moved back to the table. "And I Saturday. And we worked. And I didn't push. But I noticed, we both noticed, that I hadn't asked the question of a disinterested slave. And he hadn't answered it like one either." Chapter 7. It happened at the Northern Summit. 3 weeks in, Kael brought his senior pack to the neutral ground at Silver Pass, a gathering of 6 alpha lines negotiating fishing rights and timber claims along the eastern ridge. I went. I wore my mark on my wrist and stood 2 paces behind Kael and kept my eyes down and said nothing to nobody for the first 2 days. Isolde was there. She stood at her alpha father's right hand, silver hair gleaming, looking at Kael like he was a destination she had already booked. He was polite to her, professionally courteous, gave her nothing extra. I noticed. I shouldn't have noticed. I noticed. On the 3rd day, 2 of the delegates from Ridgewater Pack, drunk on summit wine, freed from their own alpha's eye by an evening of loud music, cornered me in the corridor outside the Great Hall. They weren't violent. Not immediately. They were the kind of men who think persistence is charm. Who think a woman alone in a corridor is an invitation. "You're the Black Throne's slave girl," the first one said. "Property," the second one agreed. "Like that changed things. Like that made me more available, not less." The first one grabbed my arm. The mark blazed. I felt it before I saw him, that change in the air, that drop of 3 degrees that meant Kael was close. But this time he was faster. Between the breath I took in and the breath I let out, 4 steps of corridor. Kael was between them and me, his back to my chest, his arm out. His hand closed around the wrist of the wolf who'd grabbed me in a grip I could see whitening the man's fingers from where I stood. 4 seconds passed. The wolf made a sound, low and involuntary, the sound of something breaking. Kael released him, stepped back, turned slightly, not fully to me, but enough that I could see his profile. "Are you hurt?" "No." One nod. He turned back to the 2 men. "Touch her again," he said, still quiet, still that devastating calm, "and I will remove the hand that did it." He meant it. Everyone in that corridor knew he meant it. They left. Fast. He stood with his back to me for another moment. His fists were closed. Tight. Tighter than the situation required. "Kael." He stiffened. First time I'd used his name. Not Alpha. Not Alpha King. His name. He turned. His face was, God, his face. Something raw there. Something that had no business being on a man like him. "You're not hurt," he said again. Like he needed to confirm it. Like he needed to hear it twice. "I'm not hurt." His jaw worked. His eyes moved over me, face to throat to wrist to face. The path of a man checking inventory on something he can't afford to lose. "You should go back to the hall," he said. "You should stop acting like." I stopped myself. His eyes sharpened. "Like what?" he said. I pressed my lips together, shook my head, started to turn. "Seraphine." His hand caught my wrist. The marked one. Gentle. So gentle, like holding something he was afraid of breaking. I looked down at his hand, then up at him. "Like what?" he said again. Softer. Like you would burn the world down if someone touched me. Silence. The music from the hall drifted down the corridor, distant and oblivious. His thumb moved. One slow arc across the mark on my wrist. "Go back to the hall," he said. Not an answer. But his thumb didn't move away for another 3 seconds. And in those 3 seconds, standing in a torchlit corridor with his hand on my wrist and a war I couldn't name happening in his eyes, I felt the earthquake start. Chapter 8. We didn't speak of the corridor. Not the next morning. Not on the ride home. Not at dusk. He threw himself into work with the focused fury of a man trying to outrun something. Maps. Reports. Border disputes. Timber rights. All the tedious machinery of ruling a kingdom spread across his desk like armor. I matched him. I sat across from him every evening and read the documents he passed me. The ones he'd started giving me somewhere around the 5th week, when he'd apparently decided that my observations were useful. And I did not mention corridors, or thumbs moving across wrists, or the way he'd said my name in a voice that felt like a first admission. On the 39th night, he broke first. "Tell me what you want," he said. Out of nowhere. Mid-sentence, mid-report, mid the kind of quiet we'd gotten comfortable in. I looked up. What I want from what? He set down his pen, folded his hands. "From this. From here. If you could ask me for anything, one thing, what would it be?" I was quiet for a long time. I could have asked for freedom, release from the mark, safe passage home. But home was a pack that had handed me over with relief. A bed I'd never truly been safe in. A wolf they'd feared. "I want to know what I am to you," I said. The room was very still. "Yo. Don't say slave." He closed his mouth. "Don't say property. Don't say debt payment. Tell me." I leaned forward. "Tell me what you thought when you saw that man grab my arm last night. Tell me why you moved the way you did. Tell me why you haven't replaced me with someone who doesn't ask you questions." His jaw was rigid. "Seraphine. Tell me why there's honey bread every morning." Silence. "Tell me," I said, very quietly now, "why you stood in the snow and watched my window on the first night I was here." His eyes closed. Just for a second. When they opened, the gold was different, deeper, like something had been turned up in him, like a flame going from burning to blazing. "Because," he said, and his voice was different too, rougher, like it was dragging across stone, "you are the most." He stopped. got up, walked to the window. The answer to your question would change everything, he said. His back to me. The same thing he'd said weeks ago. Then change it, I said. He put his hand against the cold glass. I can't call you my mate. The words hit me some way deep. Some part of me I hadn't known was hoping for something. Why not? Because the bond, he turned. Because if I acknowledge it, He pressed his hand over his chest. Flat. Hard. Like pressing down on a wound. There are enemies, Seraphine. There are alpha lines that would rip this pack apart to get to me. And anything that means something to me. He didn't finish. He didn't need to. I stood up, walked to where he was. Stopped a foot away. He watched me come. Didn't move. So you're protecting me, I said. By denying it. By calling me property instead of. Yes, he said. Very low. Almost not a word at all. Yes, he said again. That's what I'm doing. We stood very close. Not touching. His chest rising and falling. Mine doing the same. The scent of him, pine and iron and sun-warmed stone, wrapped around me like something I'd been breathing for years. Like something that had always been there. Just beyond the ability to name. That's not your decision to make, I said. In this pack. For me, I said. What I risk. What I accept. That's not your decision. Something moved across his face. Something that looked like it hurt. You don't understand what they would do to you. Then tell me. Seraphine. Stop saying my name like that, I whispered. If you're going to keep telling me I'm nothing to you. His inhale was sharp, audible. His hand lifted, slow, deliberate, and he brushed his knuckles across my jaw. One line, one touch, like testing whether I was real. I didn't breathe. You are not nothing, he said. Rough, shaking, slightly. You are so far from nothing that I don't. He lowered his hand, stepped back, put distance between us like it was the hardest thing he'd ever done. Dusk is over, he said. And he left me standing at his window, with the ghost of his knuckles still burning along my jaw, and an answer that wasn't an answer sitting in my chest like a coal. Not cold, burning. Chapter 9. The letter came on the 4th day. Not to me, to Kael. But he came to me with it that evening, set it on the table between us, and didn't speak for a long moment. You asked me once what your alpha was afraid of, he said. I looked at the letter. Yes. I know the answer now. I've known it for longer than I told you. I needed a pause. I needed to verify it before I said it out loud. Tell me. He sat down, looked at me. Your mother was not from Ashvale Pack. She was from the Eastern Bloodline, one of the original 12 founding packs. A bloodline that has been, for 300 years, deliberately suppressed. Hidden. Bred out. I was very still. Why? Because wolves of the Eastern Bloodline don't just shift. They don't just have a wolf. They carry a second layer of power. Something the old texts call the sovereign mark, an innate dominance that affects all wolves around them. An ability to calm, compel, or command through pure presence. Something that, in the old packs, made the Eastern Blood wolves more than alpha-ranked. It made them untouchable, unkillable by normal means, almost impossible to dominate or contain. I couldn't breathe. Your alpha found out when you shifted, Kael said. When your wolf was too large. When you walked into a room and his wolves, without realizing it, deferred to you. Not to him. To you. It had been subtle for years. But the night of your shift, it became unmistakable. The fire crackled. He couldn't kill you, Kael continued. The Eastern Bloodline has protections, ancient pact bindings. If an alpha kills a blood carrier without just cause, he forfeits his own alpha rank. So he did the next best thing. He sold me to you, I said. Yes, he thought. He thought you would cage me, break me, do what he couldn't. Kael's hands were flat on the table. Yes. And instead you. I stopped, looked at him. You already knew, I said slowly. When you first saw me, you already knew what I was. The gold eyes held mine. I suspected. Your scent, he stopped. Your scent is unlike anything I've encountered. There's a resonance in it. Something that interacts with. He pressed his lips together. With the alpha bond, I finished. Yes. Is that why? I pressed my hand against my sternum. Is that why I feel? Yes, he said. Quiet. Certain. Yes, Seraphine. That's why. The sovereign mark responds to true alpha dominance. It doesn't just yield to it. He stood abruptly. It bonds to it, I said. He was at the window again. His refuge. His distance. The elders call it the resonance bond, he said. It's different from a normal mate bond. Stronger. Deeper. It's why, his hands clenched on the windowsill. It's why I can feel when you're afraid. Why I know when you haven't eaten. He stopped. Why you move before you think, I said. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. I stood up. I crossed the room. I stopped beside him at the window. We stood shoulder to shoulder, not touching, looking out at the dark courtyard where snow was falling again. The enemies you mentioned, I said. The ones who would hurt me to get to you. Do they know about the bloodline? He was quiet for a moment. Yes, he said. And if they find out I'm here, that you have a sovereign mark carrier in your pack, they'll want you. Or they'll want me dead. Yes. I looked at the snow. So this is why you called me property, I said. Why you gave me a mark that says Black Throne. Not because you think of me as. Because I needed everyone to know you were already claimed, he said. Before they decided to make you a target. Before anyone realized what you were. The mark it was the fastest way. I turned to look at him. His profile. The jaw. The brow. The way his shoulders carried weight that most men never even approached. You were protecting me, I said. From the beginning. Before you even. Don't. Kael. Don't make it. He pressed his eyes shut. Don't make it something it. What do you want it to be? I asked. Silence. Snow. His hands on the stone. Mine at my sides. What do you want? I asked. Softer. The way you ask a man who has forgotten that he's allowed to want things. He turned to look at me. And whatever was in his eyes, whatever had been living there for 4 days, behind gold and stone and careful control. It was right at the surface now. Unguarded. Undone. You know what I want, he said. Say it. A long breath. A moment balanced on nothing. You, he said. Very low. Not as property. Not as debt. Just. He reached up. Touched my face. His palm against my cheek. Warm. Heavy. The weight of something that had been waiting a very long time. Just you, he said. Then the door burst open. Chapter 10. Brennan. His face was grey. They're inside the wall, he said. Eastern Ridge wolves. 6 of them. They got through the north gate. Kael's hand dropped from my face. He was already moving. The warmth of the moment. Gone. Replaced by something colder and more precise. How? He said. Already pulling his coat. Already the Alpha King. Brennan hesitated. That hesitation, just a half second, just a caught breath, told me everything. Brennan, I said. He looked at me. His eyes, God, his eyes. Tell me you didn't, I whispered. I didn't tell them about you. I swear. I didn't tell them what you were. But. He looked at Kael. I told them she was here. I told them you'd taken a slave. That was 6 weeks ago. Before I understood what she meant. I was passing information to a contact. I do it every cycle. Routine intelligence. I didn't think. You didn't think, Kael repeated. Kael's voice had gone to a place I hadn't heard before. Below calm. Below anger. Into something that was neither and both. Get to the East Tower, he said. To me. Not a request. I'm not going to the East Tower. Seraphine. You're going to face 6 wolves who came here for me. I'm not going to the tower. He turned to face me fully. 2 seconds. Something passed between us. Stay behind Brennan, he said. I nodded. He moved. The next 20 minutes were the longest of my life. The Eastern Ridge wolves, I learned later, had been paid by a rival alpha who had found a fragment of old bloodline records, who had been waiting for years for word of an Eastern carrier. They wanted me alive, which made them more dangerous, not less. I stayed in the corridor. Brennan at my side. Guilt radiating from him in waves. I didn't hate him. I understood him. He'd been feeding information for years. Routine, bloodless, meaningless. And then suddenly it wasn't. Suddenly it was my name in the wrong hands. I didn't hate him. But the feeling in my chest when I heard the fighting, when I heard the sharp, brutal sounds of a man-eye. Of Kael. In danger. That was unlike anything. That was every instinct I had shrieking in one direction. The mark on my wrist burned. Blazed. hotter than it ever had. And then, something else. Something under the burn. Inside it. I looked down at the sigil. It was glowing. Actually glowing. A faint, pale gold, pulsing in the same rhythm as my heartbeat. No, not just my heartbeat. Both of ours. The resonance bond. The sovereign mark. Whatever ancient thing lived in my blood. It was responding. To him. To his danger. To the distance between us. I looked at Brennan. I need to go to him, I said. Seraphine, no. Brennan. I used the voice. Not intentionally. Not with planning. Just spoke. And something happened. Something in the air. Something that made Brennan, solid, trained, twice my size, step back. Blink. Look at me differently. I walked forward. And the corridor let me through. Chapter 11. I don't remember deciding to run. I ran. Through the main hall, out into the courtyard, toward the north gate, and I saw him. 4 wolves down. 2 still standing. Kael in the center of it, bleeding from his shoulder. Not badly, but bleeding. The 2 remaining wolves were coordinating, moving to flank. And me. I opened my mouth. And I spoke. Not in words. Not in the old tongue. Not in anything I'd learned. Something came out of me that wasn't sound so much as it was presence, a wave of something that rolled through the courtyard like a pressure drop before a storm. And the 2 wolves stopped. Just stopped. Mid-step. Froze. Dropped to their knees. Not from fear. Not from pain. From weight. From the sheer, compulsive authority of the sovereign mark meeting them at full force. Silence. Kael turned. He was breathing hard. Blood dark on his collar. Eyes blazing. He looked at me. His wolves, every black throne wolf in that courtyard, had also gone still. Not in supplication. In recognition. Something older than training. Something in the bone. I lowered my hand. The glow faded. The 2 enemy wolves were still on their knees. Conscious. Unharmed. They just couldn't move. Not until I let them. Kael crossed the courtyard. He reached me. Stopped a foot away. His shoulder was bleeding. His chest heaving. He looked at me like he'd never seen me before. And also, like he'd always known it would come to this. You're bleeding, I said. He stopped. The entire pack. Every wolf in that courtyard. Even the enemy wolves. I'm sorry. I don't know how to control. Don't apologize, he said. Sharp. Quick. Like the apology offended him. His hands came up. Framed my face. Both of them this time. Not the tentative knuckle brush of before. Full palms. Warm and steady. Don't you dare apologize for that, he said. His forehead dropped. Pressed to mine. I felt his breath against my mouth. The bleeding shoulder. The snow. The watching pack. All of it, irrelevant. Kael, I whispered. I know, he said. You have to say it. I know. Not to the council. Not for the record. To me. His eyes, this close, were not cold at all. They were burning. They had always been burning. You are mine, he said. Voice rough. Completely unguarded. You have been mine from the moment you walked into that hall and refused to look away. I have been. He stopped. His hands tightened. I have been fighting it every day since. Trying to keep you safe by keeping you separate. By calling you property instead of. Say it, I said. My mate, he said. Simple. Direct. 3 words that cracked 3 months of stone walls and careful distances and honey bread left in silence. 3 words that landed not like a confession but like something returning to its rightful place. I kissed him. I don't know which of us moved first. I don't think it mattered. It was not soft. It was not tentative. It was the meeting of 2 things that had been pulled together for months and finally stopped resisting. His hands in my hair. My hands against his chest. The scent of him, pine and iron and sun-warmed stone, surrounding me completely. And under my palm, against the fabric of his shirt, his heartbeat. Steady. Real. Matching mine. Chapter 12. The aftermath was not simple. It never is. The Eastern Ridge wolves were held, questioned, released with a warning that arrived at their alpha's door before they did. The rival alpha behind the attack, a wolf named Corvain, 3 territories east, received a formal challenge from Kael within 24 hours. By the new moon, Corvain's pack acknowledged the Black Throne's dominion over the Eastern Ridge territory. And the threat, that specific threat, was over. Brennan. Kael removed him from the inner circle. Not from the pack. He's been loyal for 11 years, Kael said. He made a mistake. He will carry it. That's fair, I said. Brennan, for his part, came to me before the week was out. Stood at my door. I'm sorry, he said. Just that. No explaining. No justification. I know, I said. Are you? I'm all right, Brennan. He nodded. Turned to go. For what it's worth, I said, you're the first person here who was kind to me. That matters too. He left without answering. But the line of his shoulders was a little less bowed. Isolde left on the morning of the 48th day. She came to me before she left. That surprised me. We stood in the east corridor and she looked at me with those cool, grey eyes and said, He's never moved like that for anyone. Not in the 3 years I've been proposed to him. I know. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? I don't know. Not someone he looks at the way he looks at you. A pause. Take care of him, she said. He's been alone for a very long time. He doesn't always know what to do with not being alone. She left, and I stood in the corridor for a while, thinking about what she'd said. Thinking about a man who had gone still in a courtyard when I'd spoken, who had pressed his forehead to mine in the snow, who had said my mate like it was both the easiest and most terrifying thing he'd ever said aloud. I found him that evening, not at the study, not at the table, in the courtyard, where the snow had finally stopped and the first clear sky in 2 weeks was showing stars from one edge of the dark to the other. He was standing still, looking up. I walked to where he was, stood beside him, didn't say anything. Neither did he. For a few minutes, we just stood there, shoulder to shoulder, breathing. His arm moved, slowly, like the slowest tide. His hand found mine. His fingers laced through mine. Warm, steady. And he didn't say anything, no declaration, no speech, no formal acknowledgement of everything that had happened. He just held my hand under a sky full of stars and breathed. And I let him. I turned my wrist up. The mark. The sigil that had burned and blazed and guided and protected. Property of the Black Throne. He looked down at it. A muscle moved in his jaw. I want to change it, he said. To what? He lifted my wrist. Pressed his lips to the mark. Gentle. Deliberate. Something true, he said. This is already true, I said. Just the wrong kind of true. He looked up from my wrist. The right kind, he said, would say something that doesn't have a word in any language I know. Something that means, the person without whom I lose calibration. The person whose window I stood in the snow for. The person I was terrified to name because naming things makes them real enough to lose. I looked at him. At this man, this enormous, terrible, careful man, who had moved like a force of nature to stop anyone from touching me, who had sent honey bread and left doors unlocked and called me property to keep me safe. That's a long sigil, I said. Something broke open in his face. A smile. Real and rare and uncontrolled. The first one I'd seen from him that wasn't half covered by strategy or distance. It changed his face entirely. We'll abbreviate, he said. I laughed. Actually laughed. Full and startled. And the sound of it caught him. I could see it catch him, like something he wanted to hold. He pulled me close. Tucked me against his chest. His chin rested on top of my head. His arms around me. The stars. The cold. The smell of him. What happens next? I asked. The council. The formal acknowledgement. The bloodline records. Your heritage will need to be documented and protected. And us. A pause. Whatever you want, he said. That's my answer now. Whatever you want. Not what I decide is safe. Not what I think you need. What you want. I pressed my ear against his chest. His heartbeat. Steady and real. I want this, I said. This. Right here. This exact thing. His arms tightened. Then this, he said. They asked me later, after the council ceremony, after the bloodline records were filed, after the mark on my wrist was redone in gold ink instead of silver, bearing a new inscription. They asked me what it was like, to be sold to the most feared alpha alive, to arrive expecting chains. I thought about it. I thought about snow on stone and unlocked doors and honey bread and gold eyes finding my window in the dark. I thought about a warrior dropped to his knees in a courtyard and a man who moved faster than thought and slower than love. I thought about my mate said in a rough, unguarded voice in the snow. I expected cruelty, I told them. And, they asked. I looked across the room, where Kael was standing with his senior counsel, half listening to something, looking in my direction with an expression that still undid me every single time. I found something I didn't have a word for, I said. Something that didn't need chains to hold me in place. Something that had already been holding me long before either of us was willing to admit it. And now, I touched the new mark on my wrist, the gold ink, the new inscription in the old tongue. Sovereign, not property, not slave, not even mate, though I was that too, but the full thing, the whole ancient, undeniable thing that my blood had always known and my heart had taken 3 months to catch up to. Sovereign. I looked back across the room. Kael caught my eye, held it, that burning gold. He gave me the smallest nod. Private. Ours. I smiled. And across the room, the most feared alpha alive, the man who had moved mountains and slaughtered warriors to keep me from harm, smiled back. And that was all either of us needed. To have been sold as punishment, and to have found, in the place they sent me to break, the first person who ever had no interest in breaking me. The first person who looked at my wolf, the one that frightened everyone else, and simply said, "Mine," like there was no other logical conclusion, like it had always been true, like it always would be.